friends. So today we have a very special guest, Mayur Singh, who is a passionate sustainable development entrepreneur. He has started earlier ventures into sustainable development. He is the current co-founder of Mattrvest, which is a fintech company making investments into companies who work sustainability. So thanks a lot, Mayur. Thanks for coming to Change Started as part of our series called Change Trails. So we would like first, why don't you start with your journey as to how your involvement with sustainability began?
Sure, Varun. Thanks a lot. And great to have here, and also encouraged to hear about what you guys have been doing with Chain Trace, because that's one part of the sustainability journey or the sustainability thing that is missing. The stories need to be told. So for me, I am originally from India and been out of the country now for the last 10 years. But I had a conventional start to my career. I started as in investment banking, worked with Big Four, Rothschild, so the normal corporate thing. And after ISB, actually, I moved to Southeast Asia. So I've been living in Singapore for the last 6 years and 3 years in Malaysia before this. My work was still corporates, investments, turnaround. So that's my background, largely finance and a corporate strategy guy, if I was to sum it up. But I was always passionate about doing something in the impact sector. I mean, I did my undergraduate in economics from St. Stephen's. So if I had a choice, I wanted to get into impact sector at that point in time. But it was partially my ignorance and stupidity as a combination of two when you are 21. That my conclusion at that point in time was that if I have to get into it, it is only in a non-profit way. And that was not something that I was looking to do. So long story short, 10 years later, I would say, after I took that stupid decision or analyzed Indian impact scene in that stupid way, I basically decided to take the plunge. I quit my job in Singapore and I was like, okay, let's start doing something. So essentially what my thesis was that I want to work at the cross section of sustainability, technology, and impact measurement. So it's basically how do you find business models which can utilize this holy trinity so that at the end, because there's not much talk about there's no planet B, but it's a lot of talk, honestly. So I honestly focus a lot on how can you pick these 3 points and kind of change the way business models are done today. So that's what I've been focusing on for the last 4 years. I built a couple of startups. The first one was actually artisanal e-commerce marketplace, where the e-commerce never worked. We created a great business model at the back end. We aggregated communities from across 10 Asian countries, but it always worked offline and we could never figure out user journeys online. So that is where it kind of pivoted into something called the Green Collective Singapore, which runs in Singapore today, which is using the concept of a Gurudwara, which is similar to a concept of a cooperative, a rural cooperative in India, but you use the principles and apply it on a very high cost retail center like Singapore. So that was basically an experiment and it worked very well. It kind of self-financed itself, and till date it has basically around 40 to 43 members who benefit from it, and we've been able to transfer around $1.5 million in additional sales to our beneficiaries. So that's actually something which is kind of self-financed, self-run now. And then came Mattrvest, because sustainability is such a complicated topic, and I hate it when people today say that I want to be sustainable, because you know what, it doesn't mean anything. Because it's a bit like saying I want to be FMCG or I want to be technology. It's an industry. Sustainability is an industry. It's also an economic philosophy now, because after the UN SDGs, because it's such a... So what I wanted what I was seeing was that a sustainability to the consumption side of it, right? Which is where I was working, that you should consume sustainably. However, the one topic which is definitely not talked about is safe sustainability. And there is research now, of course, coming out of Europe, which basically proves that as compared to your consumption habits, which you can make sustainable, if you change the way you save, the impact of that is almost 27 times more. And that makes sense, because where does the buck start? The buck starts with the fact that you get your salary, you put it in your saving account, and then your bank puts it wherever the hell it wants to.
Correct.
They will invest in whatever company.
Correct.
So that's where the genesis of Mattrvest came in, that in today's day and age of sustainability data and technology, while people are sharing posts about fires in Amazon, it's actually your and my money which is going to fund companies who are causing the deforestation. So actually everyone in that march and protest, whether it is in Europe or US or in Asia, is completely hypocritical, because you don't know that it's actually you who funded it. So that's where I think the journey with Mattrvest has been very, very interesting, because there are two problems. One is money is something people don't like to talk about a lot. And if you add sustainability of the money on top of it, then it's a complicated topic to explore. But sustainability is complicated, and that's what we are trying to demystify. So it's also great to see people like you trying to do it at a grassroots level from an education perspective. So it all helps. So, and the other beautiful thing I love about working in this segment and overall working in different aspects related to sustainability is that it's just much more collaborative as compared to any other industry or sector that I have worked in. So that's been the last, I give you a snapshot of the last 17 years.
Yeah. So a follow-up question, Mayur. I mean, just to demystify it a little further and break it down into pieces so that people can understand it. I mean, I think you and me can understand, but I mean, just to make it little more wider so that even common, and finance is a complicated subject. I mean, all of us know that. So how should we, demystify and make it very, very simple? Like, we are making investment, or you, Mattrvest, as a company, would be facilitating and making investments into those companies which are much more sustainable, and not into companies which are not doing any good for the environment, right? So if you can explain it, and I mean, I took these many words, but if you can explain it.
Yeah. So I think I mean, one big difference is this, that we don't suggest companies. Actually, we actually don't provide advisory. We connect you with financial advisors who give you advisory. Secondly, Mattrvest is only in Europe right now, and that's for a reason. I'll come back to that. But at a principle, what are we trying to do is to connect you with sustainable finance options, and it's not limited to investments. Okay, so let me explain that. So let me take a step back about what does sustainability of your money mean actually. So let's say you get your salary from your company, right? It goes to your bank account. Now it's actually puzzling, Varun, and if you actually do a survey, you will actually find that most of us don't understand what does the bank actually do. And forget about whether it is a bottom of the pyramid or top of the pyramid or the middle of the pyramid. We did the survey in Europe, and we found around 60% of the people actually had no clue, and almost 50% of that 60% thinks that money is actually kept, like physically kept somewhere. Now, that is a basic issue of financial literacy, which is a big issue, not in Asia, not in Europe, everywhere across the world. Financial literacy is a big problem. And there's nothing to be ashamed of, because most of us don't. Right? So like everyone is basically financially illiterate at some level or the other. And the truth is this, right? That banking and financial services is an abstract concept. And going a bit to a human psychology perspective here, the cognitive part of the brain that through which you make a lot of money decisions is very different from which you make a decision on what to buy on Amazon or Flipkart. So that is why we don't think about these things. Now, what happens in practice is you put your money in a savings account, the banks gives you a certain rate of interest for putting money in the savings account. The bank then takes that money and gives it out to either people as home loans, car loans, or whatever other products are there, or it gives it to companies also as loans. It's a very, very simplistic definition. What sustainable finance hypothesis says is that let's start changing the way the banks invest their money, actually. Now, it's I know it's very tough to imagine that, but actually, there is a ranking of Indian banks done by Oxfam. It's called the Fair Finance Network, which ranks different banks based on their sustainability.
Oh, okay.
And they have done a ranking across 8 to 10 countries across the world, predominantly European countries, just because there's more data available on sustainability. But there is a ranking that is there for different banks in India as well. Now, what does sustainable bank mean? Let's just say that, okay, let's forget investments only, right? Because the talk about sustainability in finance always comes to investment. Now, to give you some example, Germany today has 5 sustainable banks. So their savings hypothesis, they will take the money from your salary and invest it in sustainable portfolios of companies or sustainable companies, or they will give out loans to sustainable SMEs working in renewable energy or something like that. Okay. Or they can do home loans, coming back to consumers. So they do a sustainable home loan. What does that mean? So sustainable home loan, the interest rate actually depends on how sustainable your house is. So who's your electricity provider? Where did you get the furniture from? What is the origin? Can you get me a certification? And the interest rate lowers as the sustainability of your home increases. So there are these very innovative products. So the way actually with Mattrvest, we do a lot of webinars around explaining these concepts, because I completely agree with you. It's like people like you and me will talk and we will understand and we'll be happy, but it's so abstract that the simple way of understanding it is that you have financial products, whether it's a credit card, home loan, working capital loan for a company, investment, anything. Think of it as it's going through a funnel, right? That funnel is basically a list of criteria around sustainability, whether it is environmental, social, governance related, anything, right? And then on the other side, you have new products, which are sustainable products. So that's a simple way of understanding what sustainable products is.
Right.
Now, that is what sustainable banking overall is. Now, there are different things you can do in sustainable investments. There's a lot of debate about what is the right way of investing and all. For Mattrvest, because given the clientele we are trying to target, Varun, is more of people who are first-time investors. We don't recommend getting into stocks, because stock picking is a very, very different skill set, which we don't expect individuals to have, especially, and it's very risky. So we are focusing more on long-term investment products, a lot of pension products which exist in Europe as well, which actually have a lot of sustainable alternatives.
Okay.
Of course, the challenge of doing it, not just in India, but in Singapore, is also that there is not enough supply for retail investors of these products. So that's what we're trying.
Awesome. So that, I mean, declutters a lot of misconception about sustainability. So for Mattrvest, I mean, just to take the discussion forward, with Mattrvest, what is the process like? If I'm the investor, I want to make certain amount of investment because I feel that, it is important. I want to make an investment. So how does the process work with Mattrvest?
Okay. So basically, So basically, how the product would work. I mean, we are pre-launch right now. So how the product would work is that basically there is an initial assessment based on which you can choose, of course, which track do you want. So there are 2 modules within the product. One is, do you want to save more, or you want to learn how to save first?
Okay.
Because you can't be investing without saving.
Correct.
Or do you want to jump into investing? So if you go into save more, you basically, what we do is basically we automate a lot of expense management for you and tracking.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
In Europe, again, a lot of these answers will become very specific to Europe, but that's because Europe has open banking, in which the banks have to declare open their APIs, and PSD2, which is their regulation. So it's easy for us to build products through which you can link your bank account, and we can do analytics on it. So that is there. And then the other part where we are doing is, and we changed our strategy. Initially, what we were doing, Varun, was the idea was to link people directly with portfolios or sustainable portfolios of asset managers. So funds, which you could find a fund which would be better for you. We changed our strategy post-COVID because we were looking at a market where the investor is very conservative. Unlike Asia, and Asia is very different. So we basically also realized the importance of regional, and linked to that was the role of a human interface. And that is where what we are doing today is we are linking people with financial advisors.
Okay.
The value add we provide to financial advisors, on the other hand, was one, this is a clientele they have completely lost. They don't get this client.
Right.
And they're not able to catch them young.
Yeah.
And most of their clients are just getting older and older, right? So that's why the advisors are struggling. Sustainability, of course, acts as a big hook to people. And thirdly, we end up saving them a lot of time per conversion. So we reduce their journey of converting a client. And that is where, of course, our business model also comes in.
Yeah.
The cost we save them, we take as lead generation. So that is what a journey would look like. So an ideal journey would be that you come into Mattrvest, you learn to save more. You, of course, again, in Europe, we can do this because there are companies which can actually show carbon footprint of your retail purchases. Right. So what we'll work towards is kind of creating the overall sustainability score of your money.
Right.
Like how sustainable are you with your money and purchases and stuff. But so you do this in the same module. As you start saving, you can invest that money into sustainable options via an advisor. So that's the journey.
Awesome. That sounds pretty cool. I mean, India also we have started with open banking. I'm sure in Singapore as well. You guys, Mayur, I mean, what we have been hearing. So there is the corporate sector as well, the multinational. So I would say that there are two buckets. One, there are companies which are just into green sector, sustainable and environment sector, maybe renewable energy or waste management and all that. And then there are companies, the normal multinationals, who are doing stuff around sustainability. And there is something called ESG Score. Right? I mean, I'm sure it is a global principle. I mean, at least in India, I know that it's something called ESG. So, can you maybe considering it as you are the expert, can you elaborate a little more on that and tell our audience?
No, definitely. I think let's go back to our example of the funnel. So you have conventional products and the funnel. Now, ESG, which stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance, is one of the most popular criteria for judging companies, and it's a rating, yes, but I think it's very important to understand because people start thinking very closely of sustainable finance as charity, and that's a myth that needs to be broken because actually it's not at all. So I'll cover that in 2 points. Firstly, what is ESG actually? Now, ESG is actually a list of processes. Now, this is a financial discussion, so I will try my best to keep jargon to the lowest. So basically what it means is anything in life that we do, from crossing a road when there are too many cars or the red light is red, you always take a risk return benefit, right? So if you're getting late for a meeting and the light is at orange and turning to red, you might take the plunge, like a very simple human behavior thing. Finance is exactly the same, and how companies get valued is exactly the same. So the valuation of a company really depends on the risk that exists in that company making a product or providing a service, very simply. Now, environmental, social, and governance, which is ESG, is actually a list of processes that you can incorporate into your company's operations. As you incorporate these processes in your operation, which basically makes it more sustainable, your risk of the company comes down. As the risk comes down, the valuation increases. Now, this was the hypothesis of ESG. There's a very interesting history to ESG actually, and it was actually a colored person in the US working with GE who wanted to have sanctions against GE products going to South Africa because that was the apartheid era. And that was the first time ever GE came up with some kind of a directive that they are not going to work with suppliers who are dealing with something like this. So something based on a social principle was created. So that's one thing to understand, that ESG is process. Now, yes, what happens in practice in sustainable finance, and to distinguish one company from the other company, you have a rating for how good. So that is how ESG rating comes in. Actually, for normal retail investors, it's very easy to access ESG rating for companies. You can actually just go to Yahoo Finance. If you go on Yahoo Finance uses Sustainalytics, which is a rating agency, to tell you the ESG rating of every company down there. One out of 8 to 10 principles that can be applied in order to create a sustainable investment portfolio.
Okay.
There are many techniques that I used.
Okay.
So ESG is just one of them, but yes, you're right, is the most popular one as well. So that's how, if you look at larger MNCs, like you rightly said, whether it's a Unilever or anyone else, or any most listed companies, I would say, you will find an ESG.
So coming back to Mattrvest, so are you guys also connected ESG rating and any other?
So we stay aloof because we basically don't, we try to stay away from providing financial advice because today, the stage we are at, I think we want to do that in the future as we grow. But today, the stage we are at, we don't want to be providing financial advice because we have a human being to do that later. However, understanding of what ESG is and asking the right questions when you're going to that human being.
Correct.
So we focus much more on educating the customer because to share with you, like when we did our survey again in Europe, one of the biggest issues with investing for young working adults, so if I'm looking at 25 to 34, is don't know where to start. This is the most common. Now, don't know where to start, and the second one is complicated. These two combined basically show the discomfort people have in starting to invest, which comes from a lot of literacy related issues. So the problem we are trying to solve is more on telling people, like what I told you about what ESG is. So one way we also explain about what a sustainable portfolio is, because now portfolio is another financially jargon word, is I explain it to people as making a salad. Like you can have a meat which has a large carbon footprint, and you can have lettuce which is being grown in your kitchen garden, right? Now those have two very different footprints, and basically what you're trying to get to is, and linking it back to the ESG conversation, you're trying to basically make a salad which you want it to be healthy, but you also want to eat it, right? Now, and depending on what you want, that is very important. You might be vegetarian, vegan, crazy about meat, whoever you are, right? So who am I or you to say? So depending on that footprint, asset manager will take these different crops, so to say, or meats, and create that salad. And that would have a certain amount of satisfaction it will give you from a health perspective and a taste perspective. Think of that as a ESG rating for a portfolio. That's the best way to think about it.
Yeah, cool. And just on a lighter note, yesterday there is, a salad restaurant in US. So they started their menu giving the greenhouse gas emissions along with the dishes, the menu list they will be
Oh,
giving.
that's cool.
Yeah, so that is the first US restaurant to do so. So I'm sure, more and more restaurants and eateries will follow that. So that was on the lighter
No,
note.
no,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, yeah. But that's very
One more,
important, actually. Yeah,
correct.
go ahead.
So one more question, just to demystify that as well. So there is something called green bonds. So I want you to elaborate a little more on the green bonds and tell the audience what it is.
Yeah, so green bonds basically, see, bonds are essentially instruments which are instead of basically it's kind of a debt, right? So it's kind of a loan. So a company can issue a green bond, and what they would issue a green bond for would be a certain set of activities they're going to do, and they want to finance it, simply put, and then people can access it. Green bonds are issued both to institutional and retail investors. Just to explain what that means, is institutional investors are people who are looking to invest larger sums of money. So when green bonds normally are issued, they will be initially open to institutional investors. So let's say if I and you run a company and we are trying to build a new manufacturing plant, however, it's going to run on renewable energy, it's circular in the way it's designed, and what it's making is also sustainable. So we will issue a green bond. But initially, if we have to raise like 100, then we want most of the bond to be subscribed quickly. So we will get more institutional people who can put large sums of money, and then you open it to retail investors, which is people like you and me. So the green bonds actually have been very popular. However, green bonds have also been criticized a lot because there's a lot of greenwashing that happens with green bonds. And but green bonds is a very good way for people to start investing in sustainability because they are very low risk. So that is where there is a huge push towards green bonds. When I look at the role that green bonds would play, and if you look at it from a portfolio perspective, green bonds basically provide you the low risk option.
Yeah.
So that's where green bonds are, but green bonds are getting very, very popular.
And to me, at least principally, it sounds interesting because the companies are making investments into the green practices or sustainable practices as such. So it is a good policy. Let's see how that goes. So thanks a lot, Mayur, for demystifying so many confusing words. So just coming back to Mattrvest, when is the product launch? And as a user, lot of probably millennials and Generation Z would be using. How will the product look, and when are you launching it?
So we'll be looking to launch now and creating it, but actually one thing which we're doing before that is also we launched a campaign called My Money My Planet, in which what we did was that we basically, you can go to the website, it's called mymoneymyplanet.com, and you can actually ask your bank, where is my money saved? Because that's what we wanted to enable people to understand first. And we started it in Europe and we got a lot of traction. Some of the banks started getting too many letters, so they scheduled a call with us. It's not to say that banks are bad. We need banks. Actually, even with so many fintechs, whether it's India or whether it's anywhere, you need banks. So let's not forget them. Because one Wirecard loses $2 billion just overnight today. And that's a fact. And that's a much stricter regulation. So I think sometimes as fintechs we beat our chest too much. So I'm a very different school of thought. I think you need banks. Maybe the way we have used banks in the past, that needs to change. And fintechs will actually provide a huge value add there. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to work with the banks to do exactly what we're doing on this call. Let's demystify. Let's explain it to people what's happening, right? So now, like if you go to banks, and a lot of conversation around loans is that, oh, banks have been funding coal despite their commitments towards sustainability, right? And this is a global argument.
Correct.
So, however, when you talk to banks, right, you'll realize that, okay, they have said that they will basically not fund coal, moving forward. And I'm talking of multinational banks like BNP Paribas, Deutsche, who are in multiple countries across the world. However, they cannot stop a loan facility that they've given for a 30-year loan to a company, which was done in 2010. They cannot do that, right? There is a gap, and there is a huge issue in the way financial institutions have been talking. A lot of that, and I come from that part of the world, a lot of that is intentional. A lot of that is intentional so that there could be hidden fees, hidden charges, and everything else. And the sector has remained lazy for a very long time. And that's why every 10 years it crashes. There is a reason. There is a systemic issue in it. So basically, because of that, you have given up on actually educating the consumer. So that's what we want to do with that campaign. And actually, that campaign, we started it in Europe, and we're trying to get it to Asia just to increase the awareness. And so October, November is when we'll start talking about it more in Asia. That, like, why not?
Yeah.
It's always a question of why not. So it's basically very simple. You sign a manifesto, and we send you a letter to your bank on your behalf, asking and demanding the bank that where is my money? So where is my savings going? Because that's where the conversation honestly needs to start.
Yeah, good, cool. That sounds good. I mean, so are you seeing some traction in there? I mean, are people responding to this platform?
Yes. So we started in Europe at a very small level. So we had a bunch of things, because you can do two actions. You can either sign the manifesto, or you can take a selfie with your bank card and tag your bank and ask.
Oh, nice.
So it was a bit like, I don't know if you're aware of the Fashion Revolution campaign on Who Made My Clothes. So we were basically taking inspiration from that, and I was like, okay, who made my clothes? So where is my money saved? So basically that's how we started. So it picked up a lot in Berlin, which is where we started it. A bit in Belgium, which is where my co-founder Diane is based out of, and but we also had to focus on Mattrvest. So we started focusing. We got a bunch of letters sent, and then we started focusing on talking to banks and figuring out how to solve this problem. Like, I'll reiterate it again and again, because everyone starts thinking that this is a crazy activistic campaign. No, it's not. It's actually to work with the banks. And now what we are doing is we are bringing them together all in a conference that we are doing on sustainable finance, which is on 10th and 11th of September. And what we are doing there is that we are actually bringing 2 or 3 of these banks who want to come out and explain their point. So the role that needs to be played, I mean, yes, fintech, valuations, VCs and all are great, but the problem that needs to be solved is to get people to understand what is actually happening, and then it's up to an individual to make the choice.
Yeah, awesome.
So that is the role we are looking to play. And once, of course, while we are doing that, we're building our MVP and building parts of the product. And then we will basically channel this community into taking action, which will be through the Mattrvest product.
Awesome.
Will be early next year.
All the best. So my final question, Mayur, I mean, what is your personal connect with environment and sustainability? And do you have any inspirational figure? I mean, any inspiration behind doing this?
For me, I mean, I think the way I describe myself is I did investment banking. No, for me, honestly, that's a joke. But honestly, those are the places I learned skills, which I am trying to now employ into sustainability. One of the biggest issues in the sustainable sector, and with no offense to anyone, is that it's only now, I would say in the last 5-6 years, you have mainstream people coming here. The sector was initially made by climate scientists who speak more jargon than finance people. So for me personally, I'm a big fan of creating social impact, and I'm a part of a network called the Hive Global Leaders. So there is something that you have a purpose in life, and for me that purpose is around communities and people who are not as privileged as you and me to do a Zoom call, let's say. So however, that impact can be done in multiple ways. So that's what I have kind of centered my entrepreneurial journey on. I'm not an expert at it. I'm still figuring out things, I would say. But yes, what is at the core of my belief system is that if I am not doing something which is really impactful, I will not do it. And we had that case with Mattrvest. We actually launched Mattrvest in Singapore. And as we went about doing the initial product market fit, we realized that the idea will work, but we have to remove sustainability from it. But personally, for me, and well, we were three of us that time. For two of us as co-founders, me and Diane, we were like, but why will we do it? Because I mean, I can make money. That's just make money out of building a startup. Then honestly, I don't think that's the best idea for me to do a startup and make money. I mean, it's just too much risk for very low return that ways. But it was something more. Personally for me, and it was a personal commitment which I idealistically had post college, I would say post undergrad. But I'm very happy for my journey because I think I managed to get skill sets which I can bring to this sector, and that's honestly what I'm honestly trying to do, whether it is on the consumption side, which is via Green Collective, or on the saving side with Mattrvest. So that is kind of yeah. So there's a huge personal purpose behind building these businesses, which honestly goes beyond generating a lot of returns. Which is why sometimes it's challenging because if you deal with a lot of sustainable businesses, you will realize that if they're truly sustainable, their growth is also not the same, and you need to learn. This is something just to dispel that myth. Sustainable investments have overperformed normal investments in the COVID time by 12%. So if someone comes and tells you don't invest sustainably because it doesn't perform, that person doesn't know what they're talking
about. Yeah, exactly. Very well said. I mean, very well said. That is very important, and all of us should take a note of it. I mean, we live in our own fancy world, and we don't kind of follow these things which are happening. And as you rightly said, I mean, when you are making a sustainable investment, your money will grow more. I mean, it is not just a buzzword, but money will also grow. So who is your inspiration? Any inspiration do you follow?
That's a very tricky question, and I'm not one of those guys who reads a lot of books. Honestly, I'd say actually I would just say no happily. I mean, my inspiration, actually, a lot of my inspiration has come in when I was building Kupita, which was my first startup. When I was working with artisans and indigenous communities in 10 countries. I mean, I've not met more intelligent people in my life, whether I did banking or I went to ISB or I went to anything else. This indigenous wisdom of Asia is so deep because, I mean, we talk about AI and this and that. These are technologies which are, I mean, Asia doesn't do justice to its technologies, which are thousands of years old, which is in craft sector, which is in making of a handi, making of a woven piece of fabric. Because the truth is this: people don't know that if there was no weaving, there would be no computer programming, because the first computer programming is inspired from a weaving loom. And we keep going crazy about technologies which are relatively new. So honestly, those are people who are my inspiration. There's one quote which I can never forget, and I think that's very, very relevant for entrepreneurs and extremely relevant for people in sustainability. If you're in entrepreneurship and sustainability, this guy who's a potter in Singapore, and if you've been to Singapore, it's a high-cost country. Fine Art Institute in Singapore, and we filmed his studio. This was 4 or 5 years back, and he says something very interesting, and we were like, why are you doing this? There's no sales of this today. And he gave a very good answer, and he's like, see, the problem today is that we keep talking about this word called passion. The truth is this, that, and it's a hard truth, no one wants to hear this, and no one wants to say this because it's not good PR, but passion is bullshit. When it comes to creating when it comes to actually getting money, when it actually comes to getting food on the table, not just for you, for your employees,
Mm.
for their kids and their education. It's more about responsibility. If you feel a sense of responsibility to the work that you do as an entrepreneur, then you're on the right track. Please don't do it for passion. I mean, passion will fizzle out.
True.
So that, I mean, a lot of my learning, if you ask me honestly, has come from these people on the ground. So I find it very tough not to say. I mean, this sector has so many inspirational people, but maybe it's also on my side that I have not come into a very close contact with maybe one of them and got inspired. But I mean, India is full of them. I mean, India is the leader in the world and is teaching the world today about impact investing, which is kind of a branch of sustainable finance, by the way. So there's so many people out there, and there's so much that is happening. So it's very exciting to see. But my learning journey has been through people that I've worked with.
And actually, you are now being an inspiration for a lot of people out there in the market. So thanks a lot. And as you rightly said, I mean, a lot of these ancient customs, whether it is in Europe or in India, definitely. I mean, a lot of these customs are itself teaches us so many things of how to live sustainability. So yeah, correct. So any
there's a very interesting TEDx video of this Japanese guy, and he says a very funny thing. He basically says that I have one basic problem. I just like my fried egg in the morning not to stick to my pan. Very simple issue.
Okay.
And he's like, let's look at the history of all the versions of me that would had it for 600-700 years. So he talks about this whole journey that we basically, there's a Japanese traditional, the heavy pan, the cast iron pan, which where actually you need very minimum oil and it doesn't stick. Then of course, because we had technology and we improved technologically, industrially, right? That's the myth. So so then came Teflon. Teflon was amazing, non-stick was so cool, and now suddenly Teflon is carcinogenic, right?
Correct.
So great job. No value created in 40 years. So so suddenly everyone's going back to the cast iron, and he talks about this, and he's like, why do we as human beings get fascinated by just something new, and whereas we already have this? I mean, let's harness that and let's make that better. Let's make it better in terms of design, usability, and applicability. There are so many ways. I mean, going to that conversation, we can have another call on that. But to actually weave heart stents for small kids, which kind of go in when they operate, they actually go into the body and they open like how a frock would open or a skirt opens. So all these are skills. You don't need to preserve the products. I'm not saying that all of us should be wearing Nehru jackets and walking around. That is of no use. You need to preserve the skill that is there. And I think India is doing a great job, honestly. That problem exists much more in Southeast Asia as compared to India. India has done a great job of preserving what it is. And last year I did a workshop between Indonesian and Indian artisans in Delhi, which was like a 2-week workshop. Yeah. But India has, nothing is perfect. You know, and when I'm saying that, people will be like, yeah, but nothing happening in India. But nothing is perfect, but India has done a great job at preserving some of these things.
So on that good note, I mean, are you planning to do something on India? I mean, on the Indian market, taking Mattrvest to India and doing something similar here?
It's tricky to do it because of the fact that there are not many products available for retail investors. That's the issue. And it's not just India, it's actually an issue in Singapore, it's an issue in Asia overall. But of course, and Europe is at the forefront of it. So numbers wise, sustainable finance is a 31 trillion market, 14 trillion of it is in Europe. So we want to start in Europe, and of course, it's a theme which will very quickly come to Asia. There's no option. There's actually no option because the SDG goals need to be met by 2030, and they will not be met unless and until money is put into it. So it's a no-brainer. So that's what we will also hope. So as the supply of these products increases, we'll definitely look to
all the best. What is the meaning of Mattrvest? My final question.
So the idea was that you should be able to save for what matters to you.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Very
so nice. Matter is a very it's an emotional word, and what we wanted to do was create a financial product where human-centered design is used. So it's literally based on your value system. So I mean, the ranking of banks that I was talking to you about, I'm not 100% sure if that's done for the Indian side, but for the European ones, it's not just you get to know the sustainability of the bank, you also get to know if this bank is good for human rights violation or not, gun control. So this is what matters to you, right? Like we talked at the start, does sustainability matter to you? Of course, yes. I mean, who will say no to it? So, but it's within sustainability, maybe gender empowerment matters to me more, and for you, it's climate action. So that is what we eventually want to get people aligned to and understand, and that's where actually a lot of financial products are also getting built. So that's the match that we're trying to do. So it's a kind of a different kind of a value-driven investing, not in the financial value-driven investing context, but what are your values and why don't you align it with your values?
So thanks a lot, Mayur. I mean, all the best for Mattrvest.